Craig, come on up. Matt, coming up. Calvin had to send his regards. He's not going to make it today. I know he saw some of you at the awards show the other night. So I've asked Matt Dickson from Bitboss to step in and join us in this fireside chat to close out our afternoon. So, Craig, a lot of people know you from the Bitcoin world and your work there. But tell us about your experience in the gaming world. So you have some, and people don't know about it that much.
Yeah, actually, I was the guy who came in and helped Lassiter's actually get licensed. So Deloitte had been trying, and a number of other companies had been trying for a year, and none of them could get a system built that the gaming authority liked. So I came in with my company, and we redesigned things, and we created a link that effectively copied all of the transactions and summarized them to the gaming authority. So as it was live, there was no way of getting around it, and the gaming authority had multiple copies and knew what was happening within Lassiter's.
Got it. And you were an auditor for a long time as well, right?
Yes. So I actually, after the first lot of problems happened with the gaming industry, 2005, I closed one of my companies that was doing a lot of work in the industry, and ended up becoming a director at a company organization called BDO, which are chartered accountants.
Yeah. Great. And as we'll talk about, auditing is very important to both blockchain as well as the world of gaming. So Matt, we heard you speak earlier about your work at Bitboss, but you've had a longer career in both law and gaming. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, I started out as an attorney in New York, and then...
Fellow lawyers here. Boom. Fist bump. I was a lawyer for a long time,
recovering lawyers, yeah.
Yes, we're recovered lawyers.
Yeah. Then I actually moved into building a casino in Mississippi. That kind of started my gaming career.
Why Mississippi, by the way?
It has a pretty... It's one of the larger gaming markets in the United States, kind of like Atlantic City. And then after that, I got into the private equity business in gaming, funded some online projects, poker shufflers, things like that. And then we kind of hit upon an idea that we really liked and decided to create a company ourselves. We ended up owning and leasing out about 3,000 slot machines to Indian tribes in the U.S. And then from there, I kind of got the bug to get into technology in a more meaningful way. I had heard about this great thing called blockchain and decided, this has meaningful uses for gaming. And built my team, and we've been at it ever since.
So you both, like me, are old enough to remember the emergence of the internet and the emergence of internet technology and the kind of the Wild West wave it ran into first until it matured. And then we've seen, obviously, the iGaming industry go through a similar evolution. How would you compare what's happening now with the emergence of Bitcoin and blockchain to what you saw in the early days of the internet? Because I know you love talking about what happened in the 90s.
We're going through the same fraud cycle, the exact same fraud cycle.
What do you mean by that? What's the fraud cycle that we're seeing?
The fraud cycle is in the mid-90s, you had all these web IPOs and silly .com companies and whatever else. Tokens. Tokens were the big thing in the 90s that no one seems to remember. You could tokenize everything. People were talking about the future of all this distributed tokenization stuff, peer platforms, and this whole nature of distributed peer-based stuff now is old. If you're an old bugger like me who remembers starting ISPs in 1992 and whatever else, then tokens are old. And the regulators are getting confused because there's this word blockchain, except so what? All the peer token things and distributed token systems and whatever else of the 90s actually ended up in a whole lot of legislation that is absolutely valid right now. And the same thing's happening. Not a single web IPO did anything of use. None of them. Like now with every ICO that is a total scam. Not one of them has done anything good.
Matt, any lessons you saw from the internet era emergence that should be applied to the blockchain world now that we can use to improve what's happening with blockchain and iGaming in particular?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of issues around education, just like there were when the web came around. I remember sitting in engineering school and hearing a couple guys download audio clips of Star Trek. And I didn't even realize they were on the internet.
Yeah.
I was at my son's Spark Station workstation. And then we had to learn
Probably using some P2P network.
Yeah, we had to learn what
yeah.
HTTP even meant.
Yeah, right.
And that why did we have to type this and what did it do for us? And I think it was a little easier to learn how the internet worked than it is to learn how blockchain works.
Right.
But it's incumbent upon entrepreneurs in the space to come up with new methodologies that make it easy for people to understand how this works.
Okay. So Bitcoin has taken quite a circuitous journey over the 10 plus years since its life. You've been there since the beginning, Craig. What are the biggest misunderstandings people have had about Bitcoin, and in particular, lessons about it that should be relearned for online gaming?
Oh, we're regurgitated, discredited things like Lawrence Lessig's idea of Coder's law that came about in the early to mid 90s. Timothy Wu and others, legal scholars, absolutely eviscerated that whole concept, basically showing this idea of smart contracts and everything like that. That was talked about back then, was absolutely stupid, that the flexibility of law, the distributed nature of law, all these other things are what makes law actually valuable, and that these people these geeks who have no concept of it and think that you can just put everything into a piece of code were so far out of reality that it's not funny. And we're going through the same stuff again, except no one reads Timothy Wu's sort of papers or ignores them because he's a legal scholar. And the whole point is, it's law. Judges actually don't need any of this stuff. Lord Denning in Britain moved on to sort of electronic contracting, everything like that, by arguing telex. And he gave examples of what if someone in a ferry calls out to the other side. How do we know that they get it? The protocol of the ferry and the operator wanting to use it, calling back and forwards, was used as an analogy to faxes and telexes and telegrams and electronic payments of the time. And the common law is that flexible.
You have been, studying the Bitcoin and blockchain world for the last few years. What do you think, do you wish would have happened differently over the course of Bitcoin's life to make it more usable?
I think there's a lot of things. I think there's a lot of competition for mind share, and it causes a lot of confusion. It's very, it's early days still.
Like now, why are there 3 main Bitcoins?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to people.
Exactly. So, people don't really understand the true intention of how Bitcoin was supposed to be created and how it was supposed to work. And a lot of people saw that there was opportunity, and they slid in and they tried to do, new technologies. They don't really keep the spirit of true Bitcoin.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So Bitcoin's original design, protocol, and vision is back in Bitcoin SV. Why, for our iGaming audience, is it the best place for them to
It's not
build
back,
and
it
use?
never left.
Never left, but it sort of
we've
had to
changed
reemerge.
ticker symbols,
Yeah.
but Bitcoin's not about ticker symbols.
Yeah.
That's
It's
where
about
people
a
go
design.
wrong. It's a commodity ledger, and the information is the commodity. And what you're doing is effectively tokenizing these things and making it public. Mojo Nation in 2002 had a peer-to-peer proof of work cryptocurrency. There's 2 differences with all of these systems from back then that I added. 1, the economics. 2, I made a public ledger. After having worked, going to every single public company that I went to and having people tell me, don't worry about the fraud, it's not material. Our materiality level's set at 3%. That's only $300 million a year. I sat there and thought, what the fuck am I doing as an auditor when I'm talking to these companies who are like one of the ones was Wattle, a paint company. They were making 2% total profit, gross profit, and their share price on that sort of change and finding that level of fraud would have tripled. And management are sitting there going, we don't care. I mean, part of why I got offered the golden handshake that allowed me to do Bitcoin to get rid of me was I actually went up after sort of the lead on the thing had told me, it's not material, shut up. I went to the board and said, this is fraud, this is how you stop it. And a few people got fired, and I didn't get fired, I got offered money to leave.
So why BSV for iGaming in a nutshell for this audience? Why is it the best place for them to build both applications and the best of the digital currencies to use?
Well, all the ideas that floated around in the past of tokenizing things properly, of actually allowing people to transfer money easily, and then having all of your affiliates paid, having the regulators paid, having the government paid, your taxes just instantly, removing fraud, not having auditors, people like me come in and annoy the buggery out of you. I mean, I'm sure anyone who's worked in casinos hates the auditors. I understand. I used to be one. I don't blame you.
That explains a lot about people's reaction to you, Craig.
But if you don't need them coming in, one of the things I used to work on was CATs, computer-aided audit techniques. And the whole concept here is if you can take it away from the organization and have live to-the-second auditing, you can just pay someone to basically do sampling, because you don't get rid of auditing. What you do is have checks periodically to make sure that no one's creating fake companies or doing any other frauds that you can't get rid of, and you allow that to occur live, and you remove the opportunity.
So Matt, you've had to evaluate this for your company, and why did you settle on BSV to build upon?
Well, I think, like I said in my presentation, it's that common data and security layer that the chain really brings. You know, we like to think that we can solve all the world's problems, but if you walk the floor today, there's just hundreds of companies that each solve a problem in their unique way. Mm-hmm. So it may be affiliates, it may be the content providers, it may be the platform providers. They all have to come together to work in unison, but nobody really trusts each other. Mm-hmm. And what blockchain does is it brings that layer of trust because it's so visible and public. Mm-hmm. And if you can just plug in your modules in gaming, if you can plug in your affiliate module and plug in your content modules and plug in your payment processing module, but everybody's working off this common layer.
A universal source of truth.
It's a universal source of truth, mm-hmm. and there's never been anything like it. And if you talk about how to create a successful business, it's about creating efficiency. Mm-hmm. And the system that we have today is highly inefficient.
Right. So let's talk about some of the best use cases for blockchain technology and Bitcoin with iGaming. We hear about some things, but I want to hear about your thoughts. Okay, what about tokens? You know, we hear about tokens a lot. How do you think they should be better used for iGaming?
I think they should actually have utility. The whole purpose of a token is a distributed database field. So some of the things we've worked on include game shadowing, the ability to set up objects that are actually transportable around different games. And some of this comes back to, I mean, I did audit work and security work with the company that owns, Warcraft, as well as EA and a few others in the past. And what you start seeing is the ability to find out information about the people who are, back then it was, in Warcraft, people were actually setting up mines for gold. Right. So people would actually build characters that sell and mine these things and all that sort of stuff. And they didn't want it happening in there because literally there'd be little camps of people in China who would play Warcraft all day, earn gold, build up a character's rep, and then sell it to some American and make money. And all that can be controlled as well.
Matt?
I mean, we actually think about tokens a little differently. The system is what the system is, and we have to try to blend into it. I mean, a casino chip is basically a token.
Right. A casino chip is a token. People
It is.
think that. A physical chip.
And I mean, it has utility. It proves that you have value. It doesn't have quite the utility I think Craig was talking about. But we really like the idea that we can create a token that you can actually take away from somebody if they're doing something wrong. Right? A token that can have a lot of controls, and a token that actually is built into a smart contract and actually helps us with double spend prevention and things like that.
Well, you could also build a token automatic tax reporting, right? Because sometimes, gamers don't want to report their winnings for tax purposes.
In fact, that's functionality we're building into our bridge product right now. Slot machines lock up if you win over $1,200. And we can actually unlock the slot machine through our app if the client or the customer is willing to sign in the U.S. an IRS form. So for tax reporting. So blockchain allows us to add some of this functionality very, very easily and efficiently.
Okay. What about smart contracts? We hear about them a lot in the blockchain world. They're not really that well used yet. What would you like to see in terms of smart contract usage in iGaming?
The first thing I'd like to say, they're not smart. I mean,
what would you call them then? Fairly dumb contracts?
Extremely dumb contracts.
Extremely dumb but automated contracts.
They're just automated.
Yeah,
they're
just
a set of
automated.
rules that someone has set in advance. If condition A happens, then do B. That sort of thing. And what people are trying to do is have this idea where you take humans out of it.
Yep.
There's no such thing of a system without humans. There's no AI. I mean, I presented to Google on neural networks before Bitcoin. Back when Google actually told me I was stupid because no one would run neural networks, they're too slow and they don't scale, which is what they're all doing now. And the reality here is all they are is machine learning. People set the algorithms. The reason Google got in trouble, as I keep saying, with their hiring practices is one guy who was hired by Google said women are half as good as men at coding. The machine didn't determine that. Machines look backwards in time, and they do this stuff where they say that traditionally things have happened, therefore that must be true, which is not reality. They're not intelligent at all.
Right, smart contracts or quasi-dumb, automated, semi-intelligent contracts, according to Craig. What do you think can be better used with them in iGaming?
Well, I don't think in general we're huge fans of smart contracts in gaming. In general, customers are dealing with a casino or a sports book, and they have a level of trust already. They're sending money, they're wagering, they're getting paid. The blockchain, if you can expose the transactions, if you can show the affiliates that they're properly getting paid through the use of this very transparent data layer, the need for smart contracts is somewhat nullified. I think a lot of people raced into smart contracts thinking for casinos it was going to be like the next best thing. And they very quickly realized that, oh wait, all these players had agents in China. Whether there's a smart contract or not, they're borrowing money from an agent. And it has nothing to do with, they don't care how it works on the back end. We just need to take blockchain and we need to make gaming more efficient using blockchain technology.
Yeah, one of the things people don't get is I didn't create Bitcoin to get rid of all the middlemen. I did it because there are inefficiencies. And it isn't to get rid of trust. You don't get rid of trust. When you buy something from, say, an Amazon, you trust that you will get the goods.
Exactly.
And having smart contracts set up with layers, with escrow, and making it super complex because you're paranoid and you don't want to trust anything in society is just ridiculous. And that's the thing people aren't getting. It's not about removing middlemen. Middlemen have a value. Affiliates are middlemen. And you don't get people to come to your game without someone bringing them in. Middlemen have value. I didn't create Bitcoin to destroy the whole middleman industry. That's just stupid.
Yeah, I mean, smart contracts can also work against you in say, sports gaming or sports wagering. If you're locking up the potential win for every customer, you can end up multiplying what you need to have in reserve
Right,
by a factor
right.
of 5 or 10.
Yeah, your capital requirement goes way
Capital
up.
requirements go way, way up. So it's actually, smart contracts are a huge negative in some of these areas.
Let's talk about big data usage of the blockchain, which is something I think most people don't think about yet. It's now possible on BSV because of our bigger blocks and fast speed and super low transaction fee. So we're seeing companies starting to find ways to stream data. The Crypto Fights game I mentioned is going to be in beta testing next month, and we'll be recording individual game moves for a fighting game. But for other forms of iGaming or even sports wagering, how do you see the data storage usage of blockchain being better leveraged?
At the end of the day, the whole nature of Bitcoin is anti-monopolistic because you can't get 100% of the network and maintain it, and it's built not to form monopolies. But it's competitive. It's not Raspberry Pis and home units. When I stated back in 2009 how this ends up scaling into data centers, I meant big data centers, and people compete because that's how you secure things with Bitcoin. The payment is about skin in the game. And if you have a big data center, then obviously you have something to risk. That's why you keep the system secure.
Matt, any thoughts you have about how the iGaming world can better use the blockchain as a universal store of data for all types of games?
I mean, I think there's a fundamental issue going on right now where these companies have so much invested in their current systems. To get them to wake up one day and go, okay, throw that out and let's start from scratch with blockchain, it's going to be a tough go. From our perspective, what we're trying to do is create some real utility, tie into slot machines, help affiliates have a clearer picture as to what's going on. And basically, as the customer starts to demand a system that looks more like a blockchain-based system, then we'll have better adoption. But just simply replacing it for the sake of replacing client-server architecture for the sake of replacing it, I don't think it's going to be an easy go. We just need to create utility, create new methods, provably fair. Yeah. It hasn't really taken off yet, but you have this entire industry of live dealers. You have offices in the Philippines just loaded with people spinning roulette wheels and dealing cards all day long. Why did it start? Like, people got used to it because they like to actually see a pretty girl dealing or what have you. But back in the day, it started because nobody trusted the random number generator. Right. And it's so easy with a blockchain to prove to somebody, hey, you got a fair deal here. We didn't screw you. We're not some North Korean casino masquerading as whatever. I mean, it's when people start to realize that, when operators start to realize this may not be for all my customers, but 5% of my customers may just say to themselves, well, I like the math. I like how it works. Then if you can eliminate 5% of your live dealers, you're saving a significant amount of money.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot today about the open, auditable, transparent, verifiable nature of the Bitcoin blockchain, how that's important for regulation friendliness, which is important to the iGaming industry, and to us in the BSV ecosystem. Craig, tell me why it's so important for people to understand Bitcoin is a timestamp ledger, as described in the original Satoshi Nakamoto white paper, something people forget because they keep using this word blockchain, which is taken off. But why is the concept of a timestamp ledger important?
The security of Bitcoin, any blockchain, is a combination of the economic value of the token coupled with public information. If it's not public, then there is zero security. I'll give you an example. If you have someone running a private Ethereum blockchain, you can basically have Enron or Bernie Madoff happen all over again. Because 10 years from now, the cost of actually running an entire replica where you've changed a few entries is practically nothing. If you're not talking about a public blockchain, then anyone can just start a new replica, keep the transactions they want, modify the ones they don't want, and run it out again.
And then release their
Yeah, the
clone
way you stop
fake
that
version.
is you have a transaction and everyone can see the hash of that transaction. You can't now change that. If you change that, everyone sees that the hash no longer matches. It's only there because the root of the Merkle tree of everything is immutable. That's it.
And the timestamping records the order of transactions
Exactly.
over time. And this
Which is important.
Yeah.
If you're doing bets, if you're doing a horse race and someone's betting, you want to make sure that that bet gets in before the cutoff. 1 second after, too late.
Right. And this is why you disagree with the private distributed ledger approaches, because they're just, we talk about this all the time, it's just a glorified database that can be manipulated easily.
Exactly. There's this whole thing, it's a blockchain. It's not a blockchain. Lamport signature schemes go back to the 70s. And a Lamport signature scheme is actually the hash of a hash of a hash of a hash. And it wasn't called Merkle trees back then. Merkle actually called them tree signatures. And tree signatures and blocked tree signatures came about in the 90s. So none of that's new. But blocked tree signatures aren't secure. Why? Because you can just run a whole new blocked tree signature and replace it. The only way you know it's secure is if you keep the header of every transaction and anyone can check it. If the auditors now only need to keep 80 bytes every 10 minutes, they know everything's secure, just with 80 bytes.
So Matt, as someone who came from the traditional land-based casino gaming world, now working with blockchain technology, what's something you've learned more about the gaming industry from use of blockchain that you didn't understand or see before?
I think it's an industry that changes slowly. They got into online gaming very quickly, but then it was just another 20 or 30-year phase, and it's difficult to get new technology to be adopted. But we just have to do our best to really educate people and show people why it's better, why there's real efficiencies using blockchain.
And Craig, now that you have sort of come full circle for a while in your career from auditing to gaming work and now all of your pioneering work with Bitcoin, what are the biggest lessons you've learned across this last decade plus that you want the gaming world to know as they explore use of blockchain and hopefully Bitcoin SV?
It's amazing. Satriana said those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And I lived through the birth of the internet and all the tokens and everything like that. And we're doing exactly the same thing once again. And I'd like people to start learning just what's new, what's different. Why Amazon.com is still around, why petfood.com isn't, why ubid.com isn't, but eBay is.
And why is that, do you think?
I have this theory of the fraud cycle. So anytime there's a new technology, people ramp on, start throwing out a whole lot of new words and selling the Brooklyn Bridge effectively and running around going, I can make you billions of dollars. And then silly people who don't think long-term hard work go, I can get rich really quick. And I know a lot of them are probably our customers, but gaming industry. But at least in the gaming industry, when you're playing poker or something, there's some skill. Although those one-armed bandits don't take much.
So I guess the lesson to close on is that Bitcoin's whole design and philosophy is very much about proof of work. It's written all over the Bitcoin white paper. Its whole consensus system, a proof of work system. It's also a life philosophy I know of Craig personally, and I'm sure Matt as well as me. It's work that ultimately creates value. It's utility that needs to be developed in a blockchain for use in iGaming or any industry rather than chasing the quick fraud, the quick quick race to raise money through an ICO or the quick buck. It takes real work to integrate blockchain technology's promise into iGaming. I'm sure it's going to come. Companies like those at this convention and those on this stage are working on it. And I encourage all of you to think about the real utility that can be garnered by effective use of Bitcoin and blockchain technology, and invite you all to build on Bitcoin SV in particular. If you want to learn more about this ecosystem, come to Calvin Ayre's next major conference in the ecosystem. It's his CoinGeek conference. Our flagship event is in London on February 20th and 21st. You'll meet the movers and shakers leading the reinvention and reemergence of what blockchain was always meant to be. February 20th and 21st in London. You'll hear from these gentlemen and me and so many others. I want to thank you for your attention and patience this afternoon as we explored the future of blockchain and Bitcoin SV for iGaming. Thank you very much.
I'll just say one last thing. The difference here with the ability to actually audit and see everything to tokens in the 90s is now we have an immutable record. That's the big difference. So those who are honest players, they're going to actually find it easier. Lassiter's really collapsed because it was licensed and regulated, and after the US government came in, it actually made it more expensive for the honest guys. Bitcoin's designed to change that and put it on its head.
Yeah, go back and actually, if you've never read it, read the Bitcoin white paper, the Satoshi Nakamoto white paper released in 2008. It uses the word honest 15 times. It tries to create an honest system, which is something people forget all about given its history. We're trying to fix that. See you soon, hopefully in London. Thank you very much.
Thank you.